Hey everyone, it's Fox with FoxeoGames. Let's talk about Dark Souls 3 and some of the latest news that's come out from Edge magazine, covered by a couple different gaming websites. Basically, they're talking about how Dark Souls 3's combat and movement is supposed to be more akin to Bloodborne than it is the original Dark Souls. And I don't necessarily think this is a bad thing. When I first heard about this, I thought we'd be reading about things like maybe there'll be firearms that you can use, or maybe there'll be, more of that interrupt visceral system, maybe charged attacks from behind for backstabs, which we know is not true. Or maybe like a rally system to get your health back upon hitting enemies, but that's not quite what they were talking about. Essentially, what they're really talking about is the smoothness of the movement, the way you can sort of chain attacks together for combinations, and how everything sort of just naturally moves from one thing into another. If you go back and play Dark Souls, Demon Souls, even Dark Souls 2 to an extent, although Dark Souls 2 allegedly had some smoother movement in the way you could run and move when locked on and whatnot, and it was less stilted than Dark Souls, although I didn't like it as much. But especially Dark Souls and Demon Souls, the combat and the movement in those two games can feel pretty restrictive now that we've played Bloodborne. It almost feels like you're just kind of locked in, and it's very stilted, it's very stiff. There's a limited there are limited options you have for actually gracefully moving from one move to another. It's almost each individual move you make is complete in and of itself. You roll, then you stop, and that's it, and then you can maybe do another roll, or you do this attack or that attack. Obviously, you could do backstep attacks and roll attacks and whatnot, so I'm exaggerating the stiltedness of the combat. But supposedly, according to this information, Dark Souls 3 is going to be a lot smoother. Things are going to transition more nicely. There's going to be combo attacks. There are going to be stances that you can get into. Different weapon stances, similar to the idea of having the alternate weapon forms in Bloodborne. I actually like the idea of the different stances. Many games have tried this out where, for example, there'll be a game where you can be in, say, for example, your ninja stance, where you swing fast, you can attack very fast and move fast, but you do low damage. So it's kind of like your light hits versus your light movement, faster movement. Or you can go into heavy hitting stance, where you hit hard, but you're slower. So you do more damage, but you're slower, your movement's slower, your attacks are slower. These are some pretty simple things that we've seen through the years in video games for a long time now, but I think they can be incorporated into Dark Souls 3 and done well. I don't know if that's exactly what they're going for. I haven't actually seen any real gameplay footage, so it's hard to comment. But supposedly there's supposed to be a new level of fluidity to the movement that's more akin to Bloodborne than previous Souls entries. I don't have any problem with this, actually. Having played Bloodborne extensively for dozens and dozens of hours, I'm now finding that going back to Dark Souls when I'm live streaming my permadeath playthrough, it does feel a little stiff. It feels like you don't have all that many options in terms of how to transition from one movement to the next. One thing I would like to see is the lock-on in Dark Souls 3 actually go back to your Demon Souls / Dark Souls lock-on. You'll notice that the Dark Souls 2 and Bloodborne lock-on, Bloodborne's a lot better than Dark Souls 2, but Dark Souls 2 is a prime example where the lock-on is almost like it's a suggestion to the game where you would like to face. But in Dark Souls 2, when you would roll an attack, you could actually attack in completely different directions from your locked-on target. And that really seems to defy and really defeat the purpose of the lock-on. Bloodborne is much better about that, but at times you'll find that in Bloodborne, depending on what you're doing, you could fire a shot from your firearm or attack and actually be in a slightly different direction from what you're locked onto. Or you could stand dead center in front of somebody or an enemy, dead center, locked on facing them, fire your firearm and shoot off their shoulder, to the side of their shoulder, through them, or things like this. So I think there are some elements to Bloodborne's combat that they need to be cautious about and implementing in Dark Souls 3. But I have absolutely no problem if they want to make the combat more smooth and whatnot. It will start to feel a little different, I'll admit that. I almost sort of came to adore Dark Souls' stilted, stiff combat. It was just a part of the game. It almost felt like it fit the aesthetic as well. It was just a much slower paced, more methodical game, whereas in Bloodborne you're meant to be fast paced and hectic and get in there and be aggressive. So we'll see. Hopefully Dark Souls 3 employs a more aggressive style. I'm fine with that. I'd like to see some changes to the format, some changes that I enjoy. And of course, they're going to make what they're going to make, and we'll see what we get. I have some high hopes for Dark Souls 3. I don't have a lot to base that on yet, other than the fact that Miyazaki's working on it. And I like Bloodborne. There were some complaints about it. I love Dark Souls. I love Demon Souls. So I don't think we'll see Dark Souls 3 be a failure like Dark Souls 2 was. That's my opinion, of course, guys. You can comment on some of my other Dark Souls 2 videos if you want to challenge that opinion, which is fine. But I'm definitely excited for Dark Souls 3, but a little cautious at the same time. Just want to know, what do you guys think about Dark Souls 3 having combat and movement more similar to Bloodborne? Do you think that's a good thing, or would you like to see it go back to the more accurate, more precise, and slower methodical movement of Dark Souls? Leave your comments below. Make sure to like the video if you liked it, or dislike it if you didn't like it. And hey, I don't mind. It's all a rating to me. Subscribe if you haven't already, and I will see you guys next time.